Hello everyone, I'm Wojtek Szczepucha and this is Living in the Cloud, a podcast about how to build a secure and cost-effective environment on AWS. Stay with me. Today we have a guest with us, Sandro. Hey
everybody.
How you can call yourself?
I call myself typically a full stack developer.
Full stack developer. I would say you are taking care of building some platforms. So architects, I don't know, CTO, everything in one role?
I wouldn't say CTO. I think my boss would be offended. But yeah, kind of platform engineering lead, architect, developer. In the startup, you have all of these roles at the same time. So typically I go with developer. That's all right.
You forgot to mention one thing, that you are an author of the book.
An author, yeah, that's true. I've published 2 books, AWS Fundamentals, AWS for the Real World, and the CloudWatch book just recently, together with a colleague or with a friend, with Tobias. And I need to have a disclaimer that these are self-published books, so I'm not together with a publisher. But yeah, both books were pretty success for us and pretty cool to create more hands-on AWS content, not just certification content, but really hands-on AWS content.
Yeah, that's great to hear that. I mean, I'm not being incentived by this book, but I saw it's 405 pages.
Yeah.
A lot of content. I looked through it. I read some of the parts, and yeah, this is amazing. And I saw on the LinkedIn that Jeff Barr was raising his hands that you are the author of the book that he likes. So
yeah, Jeff is definitely a great help in that, especially in the beginning when we had the idea of doing that. Like, we were creating content already for quite some time, but just free on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and on our blog. And then when we thought about the idea of doing a blog and a newsletter, and we shared it publicly and built it in public. And at some point, Jeff Barr messaged us and just shared it, and then messaged us and said, hey, it looks like a cool book. And of course, this gives you a huge credibility bump, but also a huge motivation that the OG of AWS content creation is verifying your content and likes your content. That's, of course, pretty cool.
You know, I haven't seen a better, let's say, combine knowledge into one place that what I've seen in your book. So I'm going to read it through. It's amazing. I mean, certification is one thing, and what I say that this certification is something that I learned through. So I use it as a kind of a leverage to boost my knowledge regarding AWS and other services, mostly AWS. So welcome again. This is the Living in a Cloud podcast, and today we are going to talk about new announcements. Based on the amount of what we've seen, we agreed to focus only on one topic today.
Yeah.
And this is
CloudWatch.
CloudWatch.
Because I do think that CloudWatch had so many launches this year, and in general, the launches in the reInvent were amazing. So I think all of us were pretty surprised. So I'm happy to jump into all of these announcements.
The floor is yours. I will be contacting with you, but go on.
Yeah, that's perfect. So I wasn't at reInvent actually. I think you weren't as well, right? You weren't in Las Vegas? Yeah. So I just watched the whole CloudWatch launch YouTube video launch series. So the session Mike and I think Avi did. And this is if you want to see it from first hand, the launches are really great. We got some session before as well, and to understand all of that, what is going on. And I think the 5 main topics they had, as a spoiler, as a TLDR, were first of all that they want to have more coverage. That means new metrics, typically not the most exciting thing, but if you work with CloudWatch day to day, it's important. And we go into this in more detail in a second, but I would go through the 5 main points first. So we have more coverage. We have easier correlation. This is something I really like the unified experience that you have CloudWatch now in every service pane. I think that is the goal. Then we have less silos and more analytics, especially with OpenSearch integrations. We have deeper distributed tracing, and we also see that CloudWatch is now not betting on X-ray anymore that much in my perspective, but they're using many OTels or OpenTelemetry spans. And in the end, of course, we have one huge AI feature, And I think we need to have AI features in there as well. And this is the aided investigation, but for me, it looks useful. Like it sounds at least useful. The demo looked quite good. So I'm happy to talk about all of these now and also to try them out on production apps.
Yeah, you mentioned AI. Of course, we have to talk about Gen AI and AI things, okay? But I've seen the ways how we'll, of course, jump to it a bit more. But I've seen how we can use QDeveloper, which is kind of included in the whole. And it was amazing. I mean, looking through all the logs, I've used, for example, OpenSearch for combining all the logs and looking through it. So the combined way through the AI, large language models maybe, but of course, machine learning underneath, it's something that rings a bell for me. I mean, if you want to find something and you don't really have time to go through all the logs that you are gathered from different systems, I don't know the number of the lines of the logs that you are ingesting from different systems. And you have something to really quickly investigate, to remediate the issue. Having machine learning used for it and using natural language, something that really helps. I mean, if it works in the way that it should be, it might be a game changer for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. Especially like, I think we're mainly talking about the new AI investigation. So if you go to CloudWatch on the left side, where the first point is now AI investigations, and you can create an investigation in there. And the whole idea how this was also pitched is that you have kind of a sidekick. If you are on call, you get up at 3 a.m. and you're like all by yourself and need to debug logs. And I know that feeling happened already quite some time for me. And then you, first of all, in CloudWatch, you don't know the log group name. So you need to figure out the log group name. You go to logs and sites. You need to write queries. Hopefully you save some of them. And I think the investigations should help you there. You open up a case. And I think it's pretty much like a ticket system. You can also connect it to a ticket system. So to Linear, Jira, or whatever is supported. Not sure what is supported. But then you create it, you describe it. And the cool thing is that your knowledge is already in CloudWatch. Your knowledge, like your data, your logs, your metrics, traces, whatever, everything should be already in a structured format in CloudWatch. So there should be an easy way, and this is what the QDeveloper Assist is then, to understand and to give you like clues. Hey, maybe there was a throttling on DynamoDB. Maybe Lambda concurrent executions were full, stuff like that you can actually understand what is happening. And yeah, I think this is what the AI investigation is about. What I like a lot is also just the view of two developers working together. So let's say we've both find an issue. I give you some log insights, can put in the table, you put in some metric you find, and then this can be like aided with AI solutions, with AI suggestions. And I think this is quite cool that this is possible now.
Yeah. Again, I think that it's gonna change the way how we approach the logs and how we approach the investigations, and we'll see. I will for sure get my hands dirty on it. So what's next?
What's next for me? So I think my main thing, what I liked, is the unified integration. So let me just scroll to it because I have it in a blog post next to me I just published. So the naming was a bit hard for me, so I've read all of the launch posts. I've went through Luke's tool, awsnews.com, to understand what was launched, and read a lot about the unified navigation. And the feature is often also called the Explore Related button or page, because what it is in the end, it tries to bring CloudWatch into every other service pane. So let's say you go to your Lambda function, then you will have a button on the top right corner with like a small laptop, small MacBook and a wrench. And then you can open up, and then you can click on this button, and on the right sidebar, CloudWatch opens up. But not the CloudWatch console you're used to, but actually a small trace map or a small map of, let's say resources that are bound together. So if you have a Lambda function, there can be, for example, an API or some downstream system, some layers that are attached to this Lambda function. And then it also tries to correlate all of that with logs, with metrics, with traces. And what I really like about that is that you can click through the things without actually knowing what is correlated with each other. So before, if you would like to know logs of the access logs of the API that is invoking the Lambda, you would need to go to the Lambda API gateway, figure out the log group, go back to logs insights, type in the log group. But now you can just simply click through it. And the whole part of clicking through it is what makes life much easier, because I was used to working with the Elk stack, like in more, let's say, monolithic applications. I worked a lot with Elastic, Logstash, Kibana. And to be honest, I still miss the experience of Kibana, because in Kibana, clicking was the thing you did. You found a request, you clicked on a request, you found some other correlation ID, clicked on that, and basically you just clicked through the application and found the root cause often. And I think this is what CloudWatch Unified Navigation wants to bring you.
It's amazing. I mean, I see through all AWS services that there is a kind of an unified approach to unified experience. So we have everything, every kind of a service is going through the process of the change, so they are more compatible to each other. So you have kind of one type of the console that you are going through it, and without needing to learn, let's say, new things like, okay, so this is the Lambda, what should I do? Where is the button? And you go to the CloudWatch and it's totally different experience. It was something.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. And the cool thing also is from this Explore Related page. So it's super easy to try out for everybody, because it's simply there. It's simply activated. So you can simply click on Explore Related if you're in a supported console. Sometimes I have to say it doesn't work from step functions, for example. Somehow I couldn't open it. I couldn't find any resource, but typically from metrics, from the Lambda functions, from ECS and so on, you can just open it. And the cool thing is, of course, this is again then integrated with Investigate, so with AI Investigate. So what you can do is you have a second tab and you can create an investigation from there. And then the investigation, from my understanding on, already fills in the data because it knows from which page you come, right? So it knows the Lambda function name, it knows the metrics and so on. So I think this is quite cool and quite useful for more the day-to-day work. I think this is what they saw, because the only reason why to log into the AWS console, 99% of the time is CloudWatch for me. I don't need to check my Lambda code. I do this in infrastructure as code. Don't need to check on ECS or RDS on anything else. Maybe DynamoDB, but 99% it's CloudWatch. And I think this will really help going more into the console and using the console more as the observability tool.
Yeah, I read some papers regarding how we approach to the knowledge, and if we have something that we can see, I mean, 65% from of what we can get from anything is through the looking at it. So there was a papers from one of the universities that described this process. So it means that if we are gathering more knowledge regarding the case that we are taking a look at, if we have an option to look as a whole graphical, I think that, as we know, AWS listens to the customers, and I think 80% plus of the things that happen on AWS comes from the customers.
Yeah, and that's how it should be, right?
Yeah,
that's cool.
You mentioned previously that X-ray, there is an X-ray, but they have combined the X-ray into the CloudWatch. There is no such, let's say, a side experience of X-ray, but from what I see, the X-ray is kind of included in all of the changes, and combined with all the things like AI, like automated reasoning, automated correlations for the services, different services actually.
Yeah, that's quite true, and that's cool. And like one point they also mentioned as a category, what I said earlier was also deeper and distributed tracing. And I was a bit confused also at the beginning, and so it's always a bit of a learning curve. But basically, we have a second kind of distributed tracing console now. And this is transaction search, it's called. What it is doing, you need to enable it. And you should enable, they recommend you that you enable 100% sampling. So that means you don't sample, or let's say you sample everything from your traces. And what they are doing then is they take these X-ray traces and put them into OpenTelemetry spans. And OpenTelemetry is the open standard. So like the open standard for distributed tracing, that like everybody can read them, that you're not like locked into any provider. So you can also like export them and use some other solution. And I like that AWS is investing heavily in that. And we just also see that 2 or 3, I think, of these launches are based on OpenTelemetry spans. And transaction search is basically displaying OpenTelemetry spans. And I've tried it out with my application. So with the CloudWatch book, we've built a GitHub repository tracker. So I could easily just click it through for now and say, okay, sampling 100% and transform X-ray traces to spans. And then you're done. Then you basically have a redefined X-ray where you have your traces in there. You can analyze them. You can use a query language. You have a visual editor. So this is also quite nice. I'm not sure where this is going. So I also don't know like how it compares to X-ray's functionality yet, because I'm not sure if I don't think I have the trace map yet, for example. But like the idea of having spans and the ability to use OpenTelemetry is definitely quite nice.
For those who don't know, AWS distro for OpenTelemetry. So this is the managed service that AWS has introduced some time ago. And yeah, I see that OpenTelemetry actually is taking more space within the services. And you mentioned on the blog that there are actually 10 announcements, the top 10 announcements. You're talking about 5 of them. So we'll not deep dive into all of them, but you mentioned that there is a ECS container insights enhancement.
Yeah, so ECS already had, like I think AWS or CloudWatch team loves the word insights. So there's database insights, container insights. They're like all kind of different insights. And often what that means is you have extended metrics. And we have container insights, but the launch is actually not about container insights. It's about container insights enhanced observability, I think it's called. I would need to scroll to it, but something like that, enhanced observability. And in the end, I think what it is, you have more metrics. You have more metrics for your containers and an easier setup for that. This is quite nice. I think, I think it's pretty easy to set up. This is the main thing. You don't need to patch like all of your, or install many agents and patch all of your SDKs and stuff. So in the end, you have more metrics. I've noted down some metrics like container memory utilization, CPU utilization, CPU reserved. I'm not sure if they were already there in container insights. I haven't used them much in production, so don't quote me on that. But in the end, you have new metrics and new metrics for your containers and for your Kubernetes cluster.
So I like that AWS is adding more features and adding more options, so you can maybe not yet get rid of the third-party solutions, but I think that this path is going to it. What do you think?
Yeah, so I think that as well. And the thing is, talking about like new metrics for like, typically it always sounds like not that cool. So if you're like new to CloudWatch, or if you wait for like these large new things like the AI solution, of course, they're more fascinating. But in a day-to-day life, like these metrics can really save you from either going to this third party in the first place, or just like make your life easier because you can find your issues much faster. And for example, with another new metric was for event source mappings.
Yeah.
And everybody uses Lambda and SQS. And everybody thinks, or many people think, this is like where the whole interaction is going on. But actually you have an event source mapping in between, which is doing all of the work. So it pulls the messages from SQS, puts it in the Lambda, puts it back, and so on. So there are a lot of things going on in this event source mapping. And there were no metrics for that at all. So this was completely a black box. And that's the cool thing that changed now as well. We have like new metrics, like how many events were read by the ESM, how many events were invoking Lambda functions, how many were filtered out, because you can also have filters on the event source mapping. And if you start debugging things and you start filtering from event bridge to the event source mapping and somewhere else, it can get really messy to understand what is actually happening. So these metrics definitely make your life easier. Yeah, and about third party, so the whole book, the whole subtitle of my book was also like, do you really need that third party provider? And to be honest, I love these third parties. They're easy to set up. They're really nice to look at. So there are some really great solutions out there. But we also saw many products or many companies, Toby and me, where like the company signed up for an AWS account and the second step was going for like the 10K a month, 30K a month contract with the third-party provider without even understanding what you can do with CloudWatch. And often they needed 3 logins at query and they were fine. So that's why we try to be a bit provocative here and say, hey, maybe first understand CloudWatch and first understand what it can't do before you pay the price for the third party and often the price for CloudWatch as well, because there are not many companies who take away like CloudWatch permissions and not putting logs in there anymore.
You are totally right. And it was before I joined the AWS years ago. And what was the first service? It was spoiler, Prometheus. So something that everybody was, including into the pods and so on and so forth. But what else? The problem occurs when you think about the data storage. So the persistence of the data, persistence of the logs. How can you drive it? How can you, it's good for developers if data is there and they can quickly look at the problem. But what if you have to have this persistence somewhere? And CloudWatch was the answer. Okay, there are some other third-party services, but you can store it. You can put the data to the right storage. You can use it. With the CloudWatch, you can watch what is going on there. You can define different sets of metrics and so on and so forth. And I think that's using the right, let's say, time frame, how long you store the data, it's the answer for the costs at some point.
At some point, yeah. So definitely. But I think with CloudWatch, because I was just doing like on a project also, we have huge CloudWatch costs. And I was looking more into the APIs and the usage types, and like the cost explorer is quite great for that. And I again saw that like 99% of our costs are ingestion. Like I think it was 98, I think 2% were actually storage costs. And this is always the first thing people want to improve. So, oh shit, I have my logs for 1 year because of SOC 2, but actually that's so expensive. But that's not the expensive part. So that's typically not. So it's just about ingestion. It's just about calling the APIs on AWS side, which costs so much money. So yeah, if you have huge CloudWatch costs, look at the cost explorer and look at your custom metrics, for example. So look at your API calls, what is actually costing you. But in general, I agree. So it doesn't make sense to save them forever, and it's something to improve. Also from like compliance perspective, I wouldn't like that everything of like every customer is saved forever in the logs.
Yeah, but because this podcast is also about the cost saving. So it's not about the services itself. So I hope that you will bring it up. The storage is not the case here. The case for the cost for the CloudWatch is the ingestion. So this is something that brings a lot of dollars on the pile, right?
Yeah,
so
definitely.
So from what I understand, you are describing this very well in your book.
We try to, yeah. I can give some hints here because it's in general it is very simple. So first of all, if you log something, think about if you really need it. So, for example, an API. Do you really need from the API, if you already have access logs, for example, do you actually need to have every request with all headers, with the whole body, with everything in there? Do you really need to have 100% log coverage of that? So this is something I did always. So you start a project and before it has scale, it doesn't cost you anything. And then you end up with like the same logs all the time. And then it's also have debug logs. So set a log level, or first of all, at the most basic, have structured logs. This is like a whole chapter in our book is just about please have structured JSON logs. The AWS Power Tools library is amazing for that. They give you a logger, they put in a log formatter, so you have a log level, so you can log on the debug level or on an info level, warn an error, and then sample debug logs. So you don't need all of the debug logs. You need it on development, but do you need it on production? Probably not. So sample the debug logs, set it to 1%, especially in Lambda, because it's like, don't set it too low because it's per like invocation environment, and then only print info logs. This is like the main part. And then, like I said, think about, do you need all of these log messages? Or sometimes you can have one wide log message. So many IDs in the log message, like a huge object, but just like in the end of some business logic you are doing.
Yeah, so we come to the main topic of Werner Vogel's simplicity. So make it simple, know what you're doing, have the right logs in the right place, not all the logs. I had customers who complained about the, let's say, the growing bill, but when I asked which logs you're storing and why, answer was everything. So do you need everything? Literally everything. So let's start stepping back and see what you really need to watch, what you really need to dive into. So the debug mode, what you need from the metrics point of view, what drives the business actually, what is the outcome at the end. So yeah, this is something like cost-saving options that you can start with.
Exactly. Also on custom metrics, like if you call each API every time to put a metric into CloudWatch, it's super expensive. But if you use EMF, the embedded metric format, where you actually like structure or have a log which is structured in a certain way, and then CloudWatch picks it up, adds it as a metric. This is like the more cheaper way. Of course, your logging ingestion rises again because you log more, but it's much cheaper than instead of calling the API 1,000 times to put in some business metrics. And then also, you don't use CloudWatch for having web analytics. There are other solutions for that. Use TimeStream or use Pinpoint or whatever for that. But like know what the service is meant for and know how you can use it and how you should use it to not like spend thousands of dollars only to CloudWatch.
Getting back to the topic. CloudWatch stores information, how to search through it. And we have announcement about the CloudWatch and the OpenSearch.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
and
what about it?
Yeah, I like that a lot. OpenSearch is like OpenSearch is kind of the Elasticsearch, and now you have an integration with CloudWatch, and you can have dashboards, but at the moment only like 3 types of dashboards, which is first of all a VPC flow dashboard. So you have VPC flow logs. Whoever saw them knows they're complicated typically. We have CloudTrail logs, so API access within your AWS account, and we have WAF, so Web Application Firewall logs. So these are 3 predefined dashboards you can use, and you can set them up that they like sync every 5 or every 15 minutes, and then you can look at these predefined dashboards. And for me, I think that's just a start. I don't think they will stop there, but they also integrated a kind of serverless ingestion into OpenSearch. I'm pretty careful with that because OpenSearch serverless was not really serverless and really expensive. But like they now have an option that they automatically ingest your stuff, that you just pay for usage. So for example, you query in your dashboard or you filter a lot of things in your dashboard, then you will need to pay more. But in the end, this is pretty cool for a fast iteration and fast like overview of these types of data. And I'm also sure this comes from customers because looking at VPC flow logs, CloudTrail logs, especially like CloudTrail, going into your S3 bucket, having Athena on top, analyzing them, it was like a pain. You needed to be a data engineer just to look at your API access. So this, I think, makes it much easier.
Yeah, at the same time, you would need to be an expert in data integration, expert in networking, to understand the traffic flow. Yeah, that might be hard. Yeah, that's quite difficult to maintain. I mean, I've been doing this for some time when I had to. And yeah.
And the thing is, when do you need to use CloudTrail? Typically, if you have some kind of incident, like some infrastructure was changed and you weren't sure who changed it. It's not in Git. So why did it change? Why is it public? Do we have an intruder? And then you need to look into CloudTrail, and then you're already like super anxious that something happened. And then you need to understand Athena, right? So that's not happening typically. So I like that a lot.
From the security standpoint of view, when you think about gathering all the logs and understanding the correlation between them, I had a presentation on the Cloud Day in Warsaw and in Prague, and I've talked about the building a CM solution, so on OpenSearch. And why I did that is because I had a lot of questions how we can ingest all the logs, combine them together, and figure it out what is happening on our infrastructure. So this is something that might be hard to understand, but it follows the very simple queries given by OpenSearch. There is a standard for it. And I know that most of the people also know SQL. So again, welcome SQL queries.
Exactly. This is like the second thing I wanted to say, because if you work with CloudWatch, you need to work with logs insights. And I do love logs insights. It's the only way to look at logs. And you can now use SQL to work on your logs insights queries. And I tried this out also with our example application there. And like you can get your Lambda logs and you have a request ID. And then you can make a join with a second log group and get some data about the integration status, the latency and stuff like that. And it's a simple join. Like everybody understands SQL, or like most of them, even like Claude or ChatGPT understand SQL much better than compared to logs insights query or Q. So you can use all of that. And I really like this new SQL thing, that you can use it in logs insights. And I really didn't thought about that this will happen, to be honest. So it was not on my mind at all.
Me neither. And yeah, I think that you pointed one thing, that almost everyone who is taking kind of an IT job understands the basic SQL queries. When I was in my university, we started with that. So
yeah. I started with C and with SQL and with PHP. And yeah, so you needed to understand that. And I think it's also good to understand these things, because in the end, also if you have cool databases like NoSQL databases like DynamoDB, or some argue that MongoDB is nice, you still have these relations everywhere. So you still need to understand what belongs to each other and what doesn't, and how like normalized data looks like. So that's also what I like about SQL. So I'm going back and use SQL a lot more now with another launch, like with distributed SQL from AWS, which is not a CloudWatch feature, but I like that a lot.
That's cool. What's next?
Let me look on my list. We have OpenSearch, we have transaction search. Application signals was also quite interesting, because I've written about application signals already in the CloudWatch book. And there's also a really cool workshop, One Observability it's called, about CloudWatch, not from myself, but from AWS, where they have like this huge Kubernetes cluster, the pet clinic. So this is always the example they also use in the launches. And application signals was already there. So again, I was a bit confused, because I've read application signals was launched, but it was already there. But I think they integrated some more stuff again with OpenTelemetry. So you can use OpenTelemetry spans. So again, and you need to install either an agent like the OpenTel collector, or somehow if you use transaction search and let them transform, you automatically get an application signal dashboard as well. Not sure how that works yet. All of that with infrastructure as code, but this is what I saw so far. And in application signals, you have one overview, and you can have SLOs, service level objectives. And for example, you can say my application should always have a latency of under, 300 milliseconds, or it should have it should available be with 99.99% and stuff like that. And then you can measure that against your alarms, against your metrics, against your logs, whatever you have, and have like a whole overview of how your service is performing. And this is also just quite nice to get an overview and to have like an interactive dashboard of seeing that without clicking through 8 different consoles, going into metrics, building these dashboards manually. And how they get all of this data is mainly by the service name. So this is why they say they need OTel, for example. So they get like the OTel variable service name or application name, and then they correlate all of that together, put it in one dashboard. And so they want to give you like the ground overview of your application.
Yeah, I think that, the latest announcements are really amazing. I mean, they simplify the way how we approach the logs. We have already talked about it. they are giving us tools to ingest and work with the logs, metrics, whatever we have on our applications, and ingest them into one place with supporting tools like AI, SQL language. We can deep dive based on our knowledge. So if we cannot use SQL, we can use AI. We can use AI even if we know how to use SQL, just to speed up things, right? So it's more, let's say, user-friendly. I was looking for this word. So user-friendly interface to any kind of data that might give us some input in terms of the performance, any kind of enhancements to our application, to our services, so we can boost up our business. Because it's all about the business at the end, right?
Yeah, it's all about the customer, business, and product in the end. And I think one thing which is also more like user-friendly, developer-friendly, is a pretty simple launch is auditing tracing configurations. So if you've ever set up X-ray for your application, you know you need to like have sampling rules. Then you know you need to patch all of your SDKs. And somehow AWS now gives you an overview of like all VPCs, EC2 instances, Lambda functions, how the tracing is activated in there. And I think this is more meant for like cloud engineers or like DevOps people to get an overview of your AWS account. Is it actually instrumented properly, or is somebody just clicking together some Lambda function and forgot to activate X-ray? But I think this shows how hands-on some of these launches are. You simply see, okay, you have just 80% traces activated in your account, so you need to check that again, that you actually get an overview, that your metrics are not wrong in application signals, for example.
So they have given us new features, the enhancement version of Resource Explorer. So you can right now, not for many services yet, I think, but you can, for example, select the EC2 instance. And based on that, you can see all the resources connected to this resource. So you can, again, observe what are the security groups attached to your instance, what are the EBS volumes, what is the, let's say, internet gateway used, and so on and so forth. So before that, you had to go through all the services connected to your instance by looking at the IDs. Right now, you have one single pane of glass that you see that this instance uses this security group, this EBS volume, this VPC, and this subnet, and based on that, there is an internet gateway attached. So kind of a speed up for the knowing what you're using and how it's interconnected to each other. So a lot of features that helps out to better know what you are doing and what you have on your cloud environment. And this is
definitely, because I think this is also what unified navigation is using, right? Because I wasn't sure if this is like new or not, because I know I've used the Resource Explorer a lot for looking like through tags or through like instances I've missed, and just looking like if you go to a new AWS account and have no idea what is happening, which is typically in a freelance project, then you need to understand like the account, and this is where I used the Resource Explorer. And I think this is now used in the CloudWatch unified navigation, so that you have it on the right side, what I said at the beginning of this podcast, that you can see how it interacts with each other. So that's really quite nice. And like just building this service is probably the main work. I don't think having like a button at the right side pane and correlating that is the hard work then anymore, because what they're having like the databases of the services interacting with each other and the whole resources in some catalog. So I do think this was quite a big project for them.
Yeah, I think it's the same, because I see a lot of improvements and they are very, very similar to each other. So it looks like a framework that is gonna to be used for each of the services through the year.
No,
yeah, that's
cool.
amazing. That's amazing. So is there anything else we can talk about for the CloudWatch?
I think with CloudWatch we are through. So what we have is on synthetics. This is why I said synthetics. So with synthetics, you can run canaries, they are called. So basically a Lambda function with some headless browser, and you can test your web application. So for example, you have a web application, you want to check if the button is working and gives a certain result. And building these tests can be quite ugly, I have to say. And what they launched now is that you can use Playwright as a framework. So I haven't used it that much, but I know that that's very popular. So they support that now. And also together with Playwright, I'm not sure why this is connected to Playwright, to be honest, but now you can have your text from these canaries stored in CloudWatch logs again, and therefore analyze it with SQL or with logs inside query language, and not in an S3 bucket anymore. Before, it was like the text was in an S3 bucket. And this is quite cool. And the second part is like, if you remove the canary, you always needed to clean up your Lambda functions, because a canary is basically a Lambda function, but somehow they were like distinct from each other. They were not together. So if you remove the canary, Lambda function was not removed. And I've had that on quite a scale at some project. It was super annoying. And if the Lambda function was removed, like the law group was still there, and then like all of that was not in CloudFormation. So this is now also an update. If you remove the canary, the Lambda function is removed as well.
Yeah, I think that removing services with all the interconnections between them is still kind of an issue. I used a lot of the other service, which is called AWS New, and it's not following all the new services and all the new connections. And you might be surprised what happens when you leave it and not clean it up after it.
Yeah, I believe that. I had it with AWS or Amazon Personalize. There you have data sets and you have solutions and you have like all of these different types, and you need to start with removing one type that you can remove the other, and then cleaning stuff up like that is horrible sometimes. So that's, folks, use infrastructure as code and your life will be much easier.
Yeah, I think that we are aiming for just saying that use infrastructure as code if it's possible.
Yeah.
It takes off a lot of burden when you are in it and you are designing and maintaining and applying the changes to your infrastructure through the infrastructure as code.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of burden and heavy lifting in terms of cleaning up the environments. After all, when you, for example, have to spin up the development that will be tested through the week and you want to get rid of it to just lower the cost, the total cost of your infrastructure. And without that, it might be hard. Of course, AWS is introducing some new features like finding the idle resources. So you can see that there are EBS volumes that are not used for a longer time, that there are EC2 instances that can be turned off. There is a lot of improvements in terms of our auto-scaling. So there is a machine learning algorithm that can understand your workload through the year and see how to improve it and react before it happens. I mean, when let's say Black Friday comes in or the growth in your service, so you know that you should be applying some changes to fulfill their requirement for the traffic, but they do it for you right now. So you can predict somehow that based on the metrics, it probably needs to be resized in the next few days instead of just giving you an information that we are seeing more traffic on your website, so maybe you should something do with that. Right now, it's adding you capabilities like, okay, we see that there is increased traffic, so we are going to add another instance or two to your whole setup. Basic example.
Yeah.
You see, this is, I don't know, 40-something minutes. We're talking about only one set of services.
Yeah. That's pretty insane, but this reinvent was very good. So I loved all of the launches, also the general launches, pretty insane. So yesterday my whole day I think was just about like, I thought I just go quickly through the launches, try them out on my app, and then summarize some of them. And I think it took me all day, but it was quite fun to dig through the documentation, through the launch announcement, through social media, what people are saying. So I liked that a lot. So good props to you, AWS.
You know, I have a list that I'm going to watch to the end of the year. It's a long list. I've started with some of the announcements regarding how they have restructured the underlying hardware. Starting from networking, how they manage the time, how it's done. I mean, I really wanted to take a deep dive into the technical part of this. So there are a lot of sessions regarding that.
No, nice. Okay.
And it's level 300. So quite deep. And really, when you think about how they approach, for example, to changing the fibers connecting each regions, or how they manage time and use the satellites to synchronize this time. And
Yeah,
they
that's
went to the
insane.
milliseconds in terms of handling the difference for each region. Looks like that you can understand at the end what is going to happen in next years. Because, without, for example, the time synchronization, it wouldn't be possible to create distributed SQL.
Yeah, 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 that's true. And I saw something from AJ, I think some tweet about that as well, like that they really worked on their own fiber cables and fiber network. And I think that's quite insane. And this is what probably many people or many companies also don't get if you're the size of AWS, making like differences on the core, like on the backbone of everything. It makes just such a huge difference. And they can in the end do it because, they are like the biggest data provider probably. They're out there.
Yeah, because also they are the one who built all that stuff, and they can take care of each part of this to the last, particular thing that is taking care of all the infrastructure. So I really, really like it. I mean, this is, for me, it's amazing, a good word, how they manage all the changes.
Yeah.
Because they are reconstructing, they're managing the status quo, and for everything they built, they are taking a step back, taking a broader look what is going on. So yeah, they're challenging the status quo.
Yeah, definitely. That's pretty insane and pretty impressive to see.
Yeah, I think that we have covered all the topics for today. So
I think so as
thank
well.
you for being with me. I really enjoyed this meeting. And by the way, I will put all the links to your blog, to your book under description.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
So I hope that we can meet again.
Yeah. I was in Poland this year already, so I hope we can do it next year, or we find another podcast episode to record. So thank you as well. I really like that you started a podcast, and really like that I was the first guest. So I appreciate it a lot. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for you. Thank you for being with me. And yeah, I think that the main reason I started this podcast is that I couldn't find the one that was describing all the changes, all the services from the security point of view, from the architectural point of view. And the aim is to, maybe not too often, maybe in 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, just to give some kind of an input what is going on within the AWS, but not only just expressing that something happened, but also giving a kind of a glimpse about the architecture. So this is living in the cloud.
That's definitely great. Cool. Thank you.